When it comes to horse racing, you can never have too much information. With twinspires, you can place your bets with confidence, whether you use handicapping insights like our Brisnet speed ratings, prime power and past performances, the guidance of our experts' top picks, or just choose a name that catches your eye. Yes! No matter how you pick your horse, bet with twinspires. And now you can race to victory with twinspires tournaments.
Welcome back to the twinspires Racing Roundtable. I'm Ashley Anderson here with James Scully and Vance Hansen. We're going to be looking back at a very exciting edition of the Breeders' Cup at Del Mar, talking about the Classic, the Juvenile Fillies, and other races that, well, they all caught our eye, but ones that specifically stood out to us. So let's start with the Juvenile and the Juvenile Fillies. And James, what were your takeaways from either of those races?
Well, I thought Citizen Bull definitely caught a break. He took advantage of East Avenue because Citizen Bull broke out to the right a little bit at the start of the Juvenile, and even Getaway Car got away faster than him. But East Avenue blew the break, expected him to show speed from the inside, and that allowed Citizen Bull to not only seize the lead going into the first turn, but to show the way on a very moderate pace. But I'm still not going to take anything away from his performance because I thought Gaming, his stablemate, who was, like half his price in the betting, took a serious run at him nearing the completion of the far turn. And Citizen Bull just had another gear left. He won, he drew off an upper stretch and just rolled home much the best. And it was a fast race. I mean, he got a 107 Brisnet speed rating. He ran more than a second, nearly a second and a half faster than Immersive in the Juvenile Fillies 2 races earlier. So I came away impressed by his performance. Definitely the complexion of the race changed, though, when his main rival, the favorite, the race favorites, missed the start. As far as Immersive goes, I like the fact that she's shown more tactical speed winning her last 2 races, the Alcibiades and the Juvenile Fillies, than she did like in the Spinaway, her first stakes appearance that she won. But, man, she was under a rod on the far turn, and just none of her rivals in the stretch had anything left, it seemed like. So I didn't think that was the strongest edition of the Juvenile Fillies, and I'm just not sure about the quality of the 2-year-old filly division overall, Vance.
Yeah, my opinions of the 2 races kind of mirror yours. The Juvenile, to me, was a little disappointing in the sense that, like you said, it was kind of a falsely run race, East Avenue breaking poorly and then not looking comfortable at all, getting dirt kicked in his face. And then you also had some other horses like Chancellor McPatrick, Jonathan's Way, Ferocious. They really had no opportunity to get involved chasing the Baffert pair on a moderate pace. So, now, this isn't to say that Citizen Bull and Gaming aren't worthy colts in their own right, and perhaps over the long term they will prove better overall than the horses that got a lot more money that finished well behind. But I am taking the results of the full result of the Juvenile with a bit of a grain of salt going forward into the Derby preps early next year. Yeah, I think your opinions of Immersive and the Juvenile Filly division are spot on. She was the most accomplished runner going in. She's deservedly the champion of the division this year, but it very much lacked depth. I do suspect the division will get a lot more interesting and competitive over the winter and into the next spring as we approach the Kentucky Oaks. And it's at that point Immersive's dominance probably won't be so acute.
Well, I personally was very excited to see Citizen Bull come in first in the Juvenile. I had him in my late pick 4 ticket along with Gaming, who came in second. Gaming wasn't my top choice, but, I was close. And then with Immersive, I understand what y'all are saying with Immersive, maybe not facing the toughest field. I will say, though, my takeaway was Godolphin is going to have a very strong contingent potentially in the Kentucky Oaks because in addition to Immersive, who's now 4 for 4 and a 3-time Grade 1 winner, we also saw a week before we saw Good Cheer win for Godolphin and Brad Cox. And that's another filly who might be a little bit better than Immersive, but, down the road, we'll see who comes out as a stronger contender. But that is another filly, Good Cheer, who just won by 4 3/4 lengths, almost the same margin as Immersive in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. So Godolphin's looking very good right now for the Kentucky Oaks, in my opinion. Well, let's move over to the Breeders' Cup Classic, where Sierra Leone got the win, one of my favorite horses. So, Vance, what were your thoughts on the Classic?
Well, Sierra Leone finally ran the race many people predicted he would have run more frequently all season. Uh, but to me, I think the performance of the race goes to Fierceness, who was never more than a length off of that wickedly fast pace. I mean, they went 22 and 2, uh, under 45 seconds for the first half, and then 109 and 2. And he still wound up only losing by a length and a quarter. So I give props to Fierceness for his performance. But then, you got to give credit to Sierra Leone. He finally ran straight. He, he benefited from the pace scenario for sure, and he took full advantage of it. And got to give him kudos. And obviously, he's now the favorite to be named champion 3-year-old colt, even though they did split their meetings two against two this year with Fierceness, but the Breeders' Cup Classic is certainly going to carry a lot more weight than, say, the Travers will. So good performances by those two colts. City of Troy, of course, was the wonder horse of the year for Coolmore coming in trying dirt. Uh, he proved not up to the task, broke slow, had no chance from where he was. He didn't lose much as far as credibility, and you can't really take away what he did in Europe this year. It was just an experiment that didn't work out. So I'm sure Coolmore, Aidan O'Brien will try again in the future. The Breeders' Cup Classic is a race they do want to win at some point eventually, and City of Troy was just the latest horse that couldn't do it for him. One other point I'd make is that the Classic really showed what dire straits the older dirt male division is in this country. I think Newgate was the best finisher of all of them, running a very distant fourth. If you take away the brilliance of Flightline a couple of years ago, this division really hasn't been moving the needle much at all over the last 4 or 5 years. And I know with the early retirements, typically among the best 3-year-olds, year in and year out, the older male division. I assume we'll be surprised at some point that the older male division will turn around and provide some great headlines and spark, but I just don't see it necessarily going forward in the near term.
Isn't Sierra Leone and Fierceness, then are they coming back next year? Is that what they said?
To be determined on Sierra Leone. Fierceness, I think, will at least compete early in the season, but whether they get through their entire 4-year-old season remains to be seen.
You've got to make stud plans, though, before the Pegasus. You just can't leave it wide open, run January 25th or whatever, and then just ship the next Monday to Lanes or Spendthrift or somewhere. Because they're going to have to make a decision before they get to the Pegasus. And the way I read it was they're both going to come back. They're both owned by Coolmore connections. And that was the whole thing with August Rodin. It didn't work out for him, but O'Brien talked about it. They could have syndicated him. And he said that they want to watch those horses run. They're getting older. So I know there's other people involved with Coolmore, but if it's left up to them, I think they're both definitely going to race all next year, and they'll have to make a decision before the Pegasus. Especially if they're going to sell the breeding rights and everything.
Well, James, what is that your takeaway from the Classic?
My takeaway was, listen, I thought that Sierra Leone, well, first off, I'm going to say the track sped up significantly. You can look at the internal fractions in the sprint. That wasn't a stellar edition that flew. Even Full Serrano, look how fast he's finishing in the dirt mile. That track got significantly faster late in the day. And I thought middle and outside pass were best. I thought horses stuck down inside were at a disadvantage on the main track. And I think that that really hurt City of Troy. Didn't get out sharply. He might have been able to make up for it if he had been drawn outside, but he wasn't. He was in post 3. And I thought being drawn in post 11 helped Sierra Leone. He got out from that post. He lost ground every step of the way. He ran way wider than Fierceness did. But he basically, Pratt, he didn't have him in last or next to last. He had him back in like 9th or 10th, which was better than being at the very tail of the field. He made a move early on the back stretch to get closer, going on the midway down the back stretch to get closer on the far turn. And then he ran about 6 or 7 wide through the turn and kept it going and was more professional through the stretch. So I give him kudos. I think he's improved off of his races at Saratoga. The connections, Chad Brown and the owner, Sierra Leone, wanted him to peak this spring and summer, and he didn't. For whatever reason, he's a late developing colt. He's just hitting his best stride right now. If he runs next year, he's going to be formidable, Sierra Leone. As far as fierceness, White Barrio was chasing a hot pace in last year's Classic. It's not how fast these classy front-running types are going. It's how they're doing it. He was always like a half length or a length behind the pace setter. He was always clear a third. He was never going head and head through those hot splits. He had every chance to win, and he came up a length and a half short at second. It was still a massive performance. He's run really well. This year's Classic field, Sierra Leone, Fierceness, and Forever Young would have beaten White Barrio like a drum last year. It was a way deeper race this year, and they all ran great. And I thought Forever Young got the absolute worst of it. I thought he had to check slightly going in that first turn from the inside, never looked comfortable. The jock had to ask him going into the far turn just to avoid losing position while buried down in a claustrophobic spot on the inside on the worst part of the track. And it wasn't until the final eighth of a mile or final 3/16 maybe where Taki gets him outside. He made up 5 lengths on the top pair. He ran out of room on the wire. I would have liked to have seen what Forever Young would have done from post 11. And if you put Fierceness and Sierra Leone down in post 2 or 3, I think their outcome would have been different. So I do give Forever Young a lot of credit for his performance in third.
Yeah, Forever Young, actually, drawing the rail, I had concerns about that spot. That post had not produced a winner in over 20 years. And I ended up, one of my takeaways, and kind of goes into the wagering we'll talk about later, but I had Forever Young in my superfecta originally in 3rd and 4th and took him out in 3rd place and decided to play Highland Falls to come in 3rd and 4th. Big mistake, because I had Sierra Leone to win. I had Fierceness and Newgate in my superfecta, but that cost me because I put too much emphasis on the rail thinking that was going to impede him. And he did have a troubled trip, but still was able to barely beat Newgate at crossing the wire. So that one kind of hurt. But with Sierra Leone, I kept backing that horse all season, and then he was starting to, come in 3rd, come in 4th when he was racing, longer distances after Risen Star and Bluegrass. He just wasn't getting the job done, and I reluctantly played him, and it ended up working out for me. But I felt like he was due for a 1.25 miles because he kept finishing in the money, but just couldn't get the win. And so pace scenario was favorable for him, and was glad to see it happen. But I was still impressed with Fierceness as well. And City of Troy, kind of a disappointment for backers. So
he's definitely got the right setup with that pace scenario. That's one thing he'll have to show next year if he keeps running, that he can win off of like more moderate paces. But he also just could be a lot better moving forward based upon that effort he turned in on Saturday.
Yeah, huge number, 114 Brisnet speed figure. So pretty impressive. Well, let's talk about the other Breeders' Cup races that stood out to us. So James, were there any that you had takeaways from?
I just want to take this chance, just based on all the other races, to point out the Breeders' Cup will be back at Del Mar for the 4th time in 2025, 12 months from now. And if you start listening to anybody talking about who they like, and they start off on Friday's card saying, I don't like outside post in turf routes at Del Mar, they either A, don't know what they're talking about, or B, are being just blissfully ignorant, because there's no chance that outside posts are a major concern in turf routes. I'm basing this all on where these horses are drawn. I'm putting in all this work after post positions are drawn on Monday, and horses drawn in post 10 and out won 4 of 5 turf routes on Saturday. They had 5 turf routes on that whole card. They all had big fields, and in these big, bulky fields, unless you've got tactical ability, it's hard to work out a trip from the rail. that's why if I'm going to talk about another performance that stood out to me, it was Lake Victoria. She had the worst draw in there. And she rallied from off the pace to win convincingly. I mean, now she outclassed the field and was 3-5, but still, I give a horse credit for winning from post 1 to 3. And I just hope everybody can remember that when we get to the Breeders' Cup next year, and you're looking at these Del Mar post position stats from the summer and their fall meet, don't believe them. Outside posts are just fine. They're not a disadvantage.
Yeah, Honore Matisse and the juvenile turf as well, outside post. Vance, what about you?
I'll mention 2 races. James already kind of mentioned one. Lake Victoria, I thought, was one of the standout performances of the weekend. She was the 7-10 favorite in the Juvenile Fillies turf, and she won in a fashion much easier than the official length and a half winning margin would suggest. It was her 3rd consecutive Group 1 win following the Moiglair Stud and Cheveley Park Stakes over in Europe, and she's undoubtedly the filly to fear going into the Guineas season next spring. I'd also note that she ran a 1/5 of a second faster than her stablemate Henri Matisse did in the juvenile turf, so that was added some luster to her victory. The other race I would mention is I'm still in a bit of a shock about Cogburn's performance in the turf sprint, probably the heaviest favorite of the weekend. Granted, he broke poorly, but his form did not really suggest that he would fold in the way he did, especially after separating himself from the field around the far turn and at the top of the stretch. So it was kind of a sour end to what had been a tremendous run of performances the past couple of seasons for him.
I was surprised that they were blaming. I mean, there were people after the race trying to blame Arad for that, making that move on the far turn, but that's how he runs. He's run those same races where he's just blistered the competition with that turn of foot. And, he's like 3 or 4 lengths clear at the top of the stretch, had no excuses. He took a big step back.
And I'll mention real quickly, too, with the dirt mile, we had Full Serrano win that race, his 3rd start in the U.S. for John Sadler. And now it might be pointed toward the Pegasus World Cup, but this was a horse that, had the lead in the stretch in the Pacific Classic and was caught late, cut back to a mile. Should have known to back this horse as opposed to Mufasa was the long shot play I was going for. So it was the Argentinian bred, not the Chilean bred, that came through in that race. But then when it comes to, this is a race that was not a Breeders' Cup race, but in the Bayacoa, Hope Road stood out to me. This was a horse that used to be in John Sadler's barn, transferred to Bob Baffert, has now won 4 straight and went gate to wire in the Bayacoa. And this is a horse that apparently connections are looking to race in an actual Breeders' Cup, well, probably the distaff next year, but, has worked her way up the ladder and steadily has been winning pretty easily for Bob Baffert. So one to keep an eye on maybe next Breeders' Cup at Del Mar, because she already, has one on the Breeders' Cup card at Del Mar this year.
Yeah, I mean, it could be the Filly Mare Sprint, too. We'll see how she does. That was a good race, but, I mean, I know she's really good at middle distances. Maybe she can continue to be really good going 2 turns also.
And let's finish up talking about our wagers, because what's the point of Breeders' Cup without wagering? So, James, did you have any big wins or any big lessons from the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I was upset about the way Saturday went because, after the Classic, I was a little bit down, and I sort of had a strategy for playing the second half of the card, and I got away from it. And I just had a bunch of correct opinions. I mean, I like Straight No Chaser and Moira. They were my top picks. I had used Full Serrano prominently at multi-race wagers. I'd read like some real positive Clocker reports and knew he had speed. And then more than looks, I was just all in on the American horses. I did have that exacta, but I backed off all my bets in the mile and even got selective. I'd had all these plans, just like I knew that if Carl Spackler, Johannes, and More Than Looks ran 1-2 in either order, I was going to have it, and I had a potential to hammer it, and I just didn't because I was all I got all discombobulated a little bit after Friday and early Saturday, and I just need to be more disciplined in my betting moving forward because my best opinions came in the second half of Saturday's program.
Vance, what about you?
A lot of the top selections that I had published on the TwinSpires Edge and elsewhere, I knew ahead of time that they were overpriced on the morning line, and frankly, the morning line in a lot of races was just way off. But I didn't expect so many of my top selections to actually go off favored. Some surprises for me were like Henri Matisse and Mulligan, and it was just kind of like that for me all day long Saturday, as all the horses I had kind of promoted ahead of time just weren't offering much value. One race in particular I was disappointed with in the result anyway was Cinderella's Dream in the filly and mare turf, and she was kind of buried on the inside behind runners for much of the final 3 furlongs, and I think if she had gotten out sooner and had been able to turn in her customary late kick, I think she would have given Moira a much closer race, if not winning the whole thing. So I think her narrow loss probably prevented me from breaking even or making a small profit for the weekend. A couple of other underlays I'll mention. Of course, I kind of got on the City of Troy bandwagon. Notable speech in the mile too. I had lukewarm feelings about both of those horses going in, and I guess one regret I do have about the mile is More Than Looks did scratch into being my second choice, and I think that would have been a more clever recommendation as a top selection, especially after I kind of praised him for his final prep performance in the Coolmore Turf Mile here on the Roundtable.
And for me, we had to create bed shares for TwinSpires, and I had the late pick 4 on Friday, the early pick 4 on Saturday. Was happy to report that I hit the late pick 4 on Friday, and it was all the juvenile races, which I felt like, with juvenile races, it's pretty easy to take a stand against the morning line favorite, which I did in the first leg and the last 2. I played Lake Victoria, but I wanted to, spread a little deeper just in case she didn't succeed at 2 turns. But, she ended up being someone I probably should have just singled in that leg. But either way, the next day, things did not go quite as well, which that's horse racing. But I got knocked out by Soul of an Angel, big long shot, who maybe was a little bit more logical when I went back and saw, that 112 late pace rating, and that closing kick proved to be dangerous. But it really didn't matter because in the turf sprint, I was never going to land on Starlust. That horse was 2 for 9 heading into that race, only had wins on soft turf this season. So I just had there was no way I was ever going to land on that horse. So that was kind of a fluke to me, but that's just how it goes sometimes. So
wasn't East Avenue your best fade?
Yeah, I didn't play East Avenue. I didn't.
That was a good call right there.
Yeah, I didn't he stumbled badly, so who knows if he had gotten a better break, but I didn't like the fact that he was on the rail, and I didn't like that he had speed to his inside either. So
But you took a shot against a huge favorite, and you got rewarded. So congratulations on that pick 4 ticket.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And yeah, I was really close to the Superfecta in the Classic too, but made that mistake. Always spend a little bit extra money. I feel like going cheap has cost me plenty in horse racing. So there's the big lesson. Well, it was a fun Breeders' Cup, and now we will focus on some Churchill racing next week, and we'll be back next Tuesday to recap some stakes action. We'll see you next time.
When it comes to horse racing, you can never have too much information. With TwinSpires, you can place your bets with confidence, whether you use handicapping insights like our Brisnet speed ratings, prime power and past performances, the guidance of our experts' top picks, or just choose a name that catches your eye. Yes! No matter how you pick your horse, bet with TwinSpires. And now you can race to victory with TwinSpires tournaments.